Okay. So for the last week, I've been focusing on one topic, which is Jesus, the only begotten Son. And the reason we're focusing on that is, our purpose is very clear, is that if we understand the story of Jesus, the chapters of his life, we actually rediscover true parents. It's an essential piece. And we know it's essential because it's what Mother is asking. I shared this last week, but she's reiterating this point, that we need to question the essence of Jesus. What was the essence of Jesus? What is the core? And she's sharing this with the core of our members. So I believe it's the same for us. For those that are new, it's your chance to question. For those that have been here a while, it's your chance to grow deeper in this realm of understanding the essence of Jesus. So she asks, what do you think is the mission of the second coming of Messiah? What was Jesus' hope? Why did he say he would come back? And I think what helps us to understand that is if we take time to kind of peel back the layers of the chapters of Jesus' life and the essence of his various pieces and experiences that have been described. And so I went over this kind of general overview, and I think it's important so we're all on the same page. Our true mother, whom we honor, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, and our true father, Reverend Sungmyo Moon, and we affectionately call them our true parents because we believe they were called and sent by God to bring restoration to God's family, one family under God. So if that's new to you, welcome. We're excited to explore that with you. But for those that know, we know. And they always start with the beginning. It's always about the original ideal. And the original ideal is best described through the three great blessings. That a mature person would arrive because of their oneness in mind and body with God. That's be fruitful. Then multiply. The mature man and mature woman would come together, build a harmonious family, build God's nation, build God's world together. And those people, that harmonious people, would then come together with the world that God provided for them to build a harmonious world. And that would be true dominion, which is the three blessings that God gives in Genesis 1:27, 1:28. The kingdom of heaven on earth. However, we know that something went wrong. Something turned it sideways, and we know what instead happened was man centered on Satan. They followed the will of Satan, and therefore we became immature people. Immature people married immature people. We created immature families, and a divided people who ended up not taking care of this world. And in the end, God grieves in Genesis 6:6 that he even made his own children. The greatest of pains that God felt. But God, being Alpha and Omega, never gives up on the mission and the dream and the original hope that he has for his children. He can't just wipe it all away and start over in some different multiverse, right? You can't just cross the multiverse and try to start over somewhere else. He has to make it work as God. It is his requirement and his heart's requirement. So then he calls on one particular individual to help to realize that, and that is Jesus Christ. He puts all of his chips in one basket to prepare a generation of people to be prepared to receive, these are the Israelites, to receive Jesus as an only begotten Son who would stand in that position as the mature man. He'd be the first truly perfect man. Meaning perfection is a journey, so it's not necessarily an arrival at a state, at a location. Jesus was always growing. The scripture suggests that he was always in a process of waxing of spirit, of growing of his spirit and developing. But he was one with God in that process. So he had the true maturity. And that mature man, Jesus not being a woman, as a mature man, would find a mature woman, an only begotten daughter, and build a beautiful family. That family would take care of the world, and that would bring about the realization of God's ideal. But we know that that's not what took place. Instead, the Israelites killed him. And Jesus had to walk a secondary course, and he gave humanity something nonetheless. He died for our sins, and he gave humanity spiritual, individual salvation, but still the work is still unfinished. And so True Mother's asking us to unpack that, understand it more deeply. And so we've been going piece by piece. Last week we did the birth. Yesterday we talked about Jesus as a boy. So if you want to watch that, go watch it. And we talked about his experiences as a boy and how he grew and how he matured and how special he was. And then today, what I want to share about is the ministry of Jesus. This is almost impossible to do, I'm going to be honest with you. The ministry of Jesus is vast. It's literally, that ministry is built, 2,023 years of Christian history. And it's hard to encapsulate, but I believe through our true parents' words, we're able to do so and arrive at some clarity. And so I think Jesus' ministry shows us three major things. One is it shows us the reality of Jesus' life and circumstance. It shows us the depth of his heart, and it shows us a direct parallel to true parents. Particularly, the ministry of Jesus shows a direct parallel to our true Father. So yesterday I talked about Jesus as a boy, and I mentioned, I'm having some trouble with this one today. Clicker. Oh, okay. They're adjusting things. Thank you, guys. Thanks, AV team. I talked about how when Jesus as a boy was actually very reflective. It was very paralleled to the life of our true mother. Very similar. Jesus was a refugee. He was kicked because of the fear of the time. He had to escape with his family to Egypt when he was a young boy. And when he escaped to Egypt, he had to stay there for nearly 10 years. 10 years in Egypt to come back as a strong man and start over their life. It's very similar. Actually, all the points of mother's life is actually paralleled in the life of Jesus as a man growing up. So in ways we can say that mother, being who she is, parallels the life of Jesus. But father, having the responsibility that he has, parallels the ministry of Jesus. The ministry, the actual work, because our true father has to parallel that. He has to, in some way, embrace it, encompass it, and fulfill it as who he is, as a man. And so, that parallel is really, really essential. And so the ministry of Jesus is profound. I'm still... there we go. Okay. It's really, really special. And it has to kind of summarize it all, it's really a ministry of teaching. It's a ministry of teaching. And growing up, I really thought that I would be a good teacher. I thought so. I thought that was my calling. Somehow I am. I'm in a pastoral role. But, the first time I taught the divine principle to someone was in middle school. I was in middle school, and, okay, I'm going to be honest with you all. This is just my experience, okay? This is a reality of me in middle school, being the goofy kid that I was. So there was this girl in my class that liked me. And she came up through my friend, and basically, when I was a kid, a middle school kid, asked me out in class. It was like we had some party or whatever in the middle of middle school class. And my response to this person was, nah, I don't date. And you know what they responded with? I'm just gonna be honest. They said, what, are you gay? And I was like, no, I like girls. But no, I don't date. And I don't date because my religion tells me I don't date. I was very proud as a kid. If anyone knows In Me and my sister, it's like, very similar at that time in our lives. We're very different now. But, I was very proud, and I told this girl straight up, it's just like, nope, I don't date. Yeah, I believe in arranged marriages. That's what I told her, which is not what we believe in either. It's just what I inserted in my mind. It's like, yeah, we're like Indians, I believe in arranged marriages. And at that time, everyone in my class gathered around. They're like, what? You don't date? Are you gay? Or what's up, man? Like, what's your religion? And I don't know what it was, but everyone, it started they were gang piling on me. It was like everyone was having an issue with this. Apparently, they had all known that this girl had been waiting for this moment for half a year. And I just totally washed it away with my religion, But then I started to explain. That was the first time I tried. I fumbled the bag. It was so bad. Everyone was convinced that I was lying to them and that I was actually what they thought I was, And so I went the next 2 years where most of the people in my high school, I went into high school after that, actually thought that I had a certain affinity for a certain gender. That's what they believed. And it didn't help that I was very expressive. I'm an incredibly expressive guy. I like to sing. I show up at the open mics, and sing these sappy songs, It's so embarrassing. But, later on in high school, I had a chance to finally kind of show myself. And I declared to everyone in my sophomore year who I was. And at that time, I made it pretty clear. But growing up, I really thought I was this kind of, I felt, maybe I am, but I felt, maybe I have a gift in being able to share and teach. And then I met someone who's a real teacher, like a real teacher. Someone who, well, okay, maybe he's not fully a teacher, but he's definitely a speaker. And this was Dr. Chungshik Young. When I met Dr. Young, and for those who remember our previous Continental leader, he gave a morning devotion every single morning for nearly 900 days, right? Something like that. I was amazed. So I traveled with Dr. Young, me thinking, okay, maybe I have a gift in this. And then I watched this man as I traveled, and I honor Dr. Young. I just texted him the other day. True Mother visited his church, which was a real big honor for him, and he appreciated that. He's doing really well, if anyone's wondering. And I traveled with him, so I toured the country with him twice. And I was shocked by this man's nature. He would go to a place, he would sit down, and it wouldn't be but a minute, and his laptop would be open, and he's working on his next morning devotion. Next place, we're traveling, closes the laptop, over to the next place, greets everybody, shows everyone some love, kisses a baby or something, and then he's there, flips open the laptop, and he's right back to working on his devotion. It was all day long. And then I asked him one time, it's like, Dr. Young, how much do you prepare for one message? And he's like, yeah, something like 6 to 8 hours. And I watched as this man woke up. I was there every morning, so I knew his lifestyle. He'd wake up every morning at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., prepare until 6 when morning devotion would start. And I would get up and I would be the MC once in a while, right, for morning devotion. Some of you saw me there. And he would, 10 minutes before the devotion starts, we have a team meeting. So he's there. He's always the first one in the Zoom meeting. And he's always wondering, where is everybody? Why are you so late? I've been up since 4. And he'd get so mad at me because my eyes look like they're, half asleep. He said, Josh, you have to fix your eyes. Fix your eyes. And he'd show me different tactics. I really thought he was going to ask me to put toothpicks in, and stay awake. He was constantly investing, but I was so impressed. And then I saw it. I was like, oh, that's someone with a real gift in teaching. He can be able to pour out his heart into it. And he'd often tell us, you found your thing when you're willing to sacrifice your sleep for it. That's when you found it. You found your calling in life. I say, well, maybe I haven't found that yet. So, it's amazing teachers. And of course, we see this in the life of our true Father. So Father Moon has the world record in the amount of words delivered from a pulpit or a speeching lectern. He has the record in the vastness of words spoken by one man. He has that record because every single day he was delivering speeches. And all you have to do is go on tparents.org and you can see it. And some of his speeches, I remember the other day I looked at Takao, I was like, this is a long, was that to you? Someone said, this is a long speech. This must have been 5-6 hours long. And we know that his world record was what? His longest ever speech was 23 and a half hours long. 23 and a half hours. He didn't pee once. He didn't use the restroom. It was straight. So, teaching is a powerful ministry. It's a powerful ministry. And I believe it was also the ministry of Jesus. So I'm going to read a poem by Dr. James Allen Francis. Has anyone read this before? One Solitary Life. So I don't have it up there, so I'm just going to read it. So try to capture this. It's really He writes, "Here is a man who was born in an obscure village as the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another obscure village. He worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30, and then for 3 years was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never owned a home. He never really had a family. He never went to college. He never put his foot inside a big city. He never traveled 300 miles from the place he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompany greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He had nothing to do with this world except for the naked power of his divine manhood. While still a young man, the tide of popular opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. Another betrayed him. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed upon a cross between two thieves. His executioners gambled for the only piece of property he had on the earth while he was dying, and that was his coat. And when he was dead, he was taken down and laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 20 wide centuries have come and gone. And today he is the center of the human race and the leader of the column of progress. I am far within the mark when I say that all the armies that ever marched, and all the navies ever built, and all the parliaments ever sat, and all the kings ever reigned, put together, have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as this one solitary life." Let's give a round of applause for Jesus. So I want to share about his ministry. And I want to begin with the beginning. This is Jesus' beginning. Jesus begins his ministry with the baptism from his brother. It was his brother. And it reads in Matthew 3:13-17, "Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. But John tried to deter him, saying, 'I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?' Jesus replied, 'Let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness.' Then John consented. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened. He saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, 'This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased.'" This is the experience. This is the beginning. And from that moment on, Jesus begins his ministry at the age of 30. But what happens after this? First of all, this was a parallel. Again, I want to parallel all this with Father's ministry. So when Father was raising himself, growing himself, and also arriving at the point where he launches his ministry, what does he first do? He goes, first of all, he goes to train under other pastors. He serves under other pastors with the expectation, and they do, in some extent, testify to him. They testify to him. He served under these other Christian ministers, much similarly to how Jesus did, to be acknowledged by the realm that it was popular at that time. John the Baptist was a popular man. He was crazy. He ate locusts and honey. But he was followed, and Father did the same. So John the Baptist is then, after this, he's placed in prison, and later on we know he's executed. And after John the Baptist is placed in prison, Jesus comes out of the wilderness, and what does he say? What does he yell out to the world? "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." He yells this out. What is this an exact verbatim of? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Who is he quoting? Jesus is quoting Elijah and quoting John the Baptist's first words in the Bible. John says these first words. Then after John is placed in prison, Jesus comes out of the wilderness and he yells these words. And what we understand through the principle is that in that moment, Jesus was effectively assuming the role of John the Baptist for himself. He was paving his own way, because clearly John the Baptist couldn't pave that way for him. And we know that to be true, because in our community, we're honest about something. We're honest in the reality. We honor John the Baptist as the first one to acknowledge Jesus. But we also accept the reality that John the Baptist fell into ignorance. And he didn't stay with Jesus. How do we know that? Of course, and these are Father's words. John the Baptist is asked, "Who are you?" And he knows who he is, but he's asked, and he confessed. He did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Christ." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" And then John the Baptist says, "I am not. Are you the prophet?" And he answered, "No." John the Baptist denied everything about his relationship with Jesus. He said, "I am not the Elijah." He even denied the title of prophet, even though everyone knew him as such. Why? Because he evaluated the situation and knew that Jesus Christ was treated by his own society as an outcast. And in Father's words, he says this: Jesus seemed to be a loser, and John decided not to side with that. We can read in Matthew that John the Baptist, waiting in prison to be beheaded, sent 2 of his own disciples to Jesus. And what do they ask Jesus? He sends them to ask them this question: "Are you he who is to come, or shall we look for another?" That's Matthew 11:3. And Father questions, is this the question a man of faith would ask? John is asking Jesus, "Are you really the one whom has come?" But he, just in this quote, he already recognized him as the one, and now he's dialing back. Now he's confused. He fell into ignorance. He's like, "I'm not sure anymore. Who are you really? Who are you really?" This same person with the very same tongue was now confronting Jesus by asking, "Are you really the Messiah, or shall we go and look for somebody else?" How disheartening that question must have been to Jesus. John's responsibility was to be a forerunner to Christ. Jesus relied very much upon the success of the mission of John the Baptist. When this very John the Baptist sent his disciples to Jesus to ask him, "Are you really the Messiah?" it was more painful for Jesus than if he had been stabbed in the chest with a knife. Anger overwhelmed him. Jesus refused to answer yes or no to that impossible question. And instead, Jesus said what? Matthew 11:6. What does he say? "Blessed is he who takes no offense at me." And in Father's words, he says this. These are strong words, so I quote them because, it's Father's words. He says, "Poor John, man of failure, you no longer have faith in me. You are taking offense at the Son of God. I am sorry for you, John." So what we understand is that John the Baptist at one point acknowledges Jesus and then dials back and he says, "Who are you really? I don't know you. Are you really the one whom sent?" But he's the first one to testify to Jesus. And when that happens, Jesus' ability to be able to navigate forward is crumbled. And Mother acknowledges that it's not just John the Baptist, it was also the family that surrounded Jesus. The family should have been there. The only difference in the parallel of Jesus' upbringing and Mother's upbringing from what we found in the study, the only difference between the two is that Jesus was not surrounded by a welcoming family. But Mother was. So Mother could, continue. And so, again, all of this, the start of Jesus' ministry is painful. It's the one who he's supposed to rely on turns his back. And so Jesus then begins calling on the disciples, gathering his inner team. And then after he gathers his core team, he goes out. And Jesus went throughout Galilee. This is Matthew 4:23-24. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. If you want a summarization of all that Jesus did in 3 years, it's right there. This is what he did. He taught in the synagogues. He preached and proclaimed the good news. He casted out demons, and he healed people. This was his work. This was the actual effort that he made. And in that time, what was he called? He was called a rabbi, meaning my teacher or my master. So Jesus really was a teacher. Jesus was a teacher of teachers. And we know this because actually in all those scriptures, and if you go and read the Gospels, it's interesting. Jesus basically goes on a tour. He goes on a speaking tour, something we're very used to. Jesus literally goes on a speaking tour around Galilee, to Jerusalem, to other places, speaking, constantly speaking. Actually, it's incredible how much Jesus spoke. He was just constantly in a state of teaching every single day to his disciples in the synagogues, in the different temples, in the different cities, and wherever he could, he was sharing. And talking and talking and talking for long hours, long speeches, sometimes to lots of people, sometimes to just a few people, but talking, and sharing the truth of God and the truth of providence, the truth of human history, the truth of who he is, the truth of the kingdom, all these things, talking. Who does that sound like to you? That sounds like true Father. In the same way, Matthew 11:1, after Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. This is all throughout the Bible. Jesus entered the temple courts, and while he was teaching, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him. By what authority are you doing these things, they asked, and who gave you this authority? So he's not just teaching in these small towns. He's going to Jerusalem, to the temple, to the main temple, and he's teaching the people there. And the only reason he has the ability to teach in those temples is because they're inviting him to do so. So it's clear in that history that Jesus was an honored teacher. He was respected in some capacity as being as eloquent as he is, as studied and as understanding as he was. But the people, when they heard him, they were frustrated. Even at one point he said that he was teaching daily in the main temple of Jerusalem. This is how Jesus was. Sometimes it was in the lowest of places, and sometimes he was teaching in the main temple, the main locations. Again, I parallel to True Father. It's the same notion, the same ministry. And this was priority for Jesus. This teaching was priority for Jesus. And they were shocked. The people were mad. He taught them many things. But certainly, and this is sort of understood, maybe not fully understood within traditional Christianity, but more than Jesus was some miracle worker, some guy with the special touch to heal, Jesus was simply a teacher. He was responsible to teach about God. So what was he teaching? He was teaching about who he was teaching about who we were, but more importantly, he was teaching about who is God? Who is God? And how do we live our life? So God the Father, his kingdom, life of faith. And something to note is that, we basically glean all of our understanding that, is in the Gospels. But we actually know for a fact that that was not everything Jesus said. So it's actually not that much in the Gospel in comparison to how much he actually said. And the proof we have of that is in Acts 20-35, if anyone's curious. I just thought this was really interesting because I noticed that, we assume that everything has been said just because we have the scripture, but in truth, it's not the case. And in Acts 20-35, this is Paul, right? And he says, "In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak. Remember the words the Lord Jesus himself said, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.'" Has anyone ever heard that verse? He says, Jesus says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. This quote does not exist in the gospel. Paul is quoting Jesus, something that is not actually in the Bible, in the Gospels. The disciples do not quote this. They do not know that he said these words. So we have to assume that Paul either heard from a different disciple, a different word, or more likely is Paul heard it from Jesus directly. Because Paul lived at that time in Jerusalem, and if Jesus was teaching every day in the temple, it was highly likely that Paul was there at some point hearing the words of Jesus. At that time, he wasn't Paul, he was Saul. He hadn't had his turnaround. So similar, I feel, is the words from our own true parents. I want to ask, does anyone here have had like a more personal, private conversation in a private setting with true parents? A more private setting where there wasn't a camera rolling? Anything like that? Have any of you been in that position? Wow. Mr. Chen, have you been in that position before? Yeah. I know you have. Those words will never be written down. Those are just your personal time, your personal words. So how much more did Jesus teach? We can't even fathom. And in that space, he was raising his disciples. Particularly, he was raising his disciples. So like the largest teaching of Jesus is in Matthew, and it's the Sermon on the Mount. This is the photo. So does everyone know the Sermon on the Mount? It's famous for the Beatitudes, about forgiveness and love, justice, living a true life, all sorts of powerful messages. This is some people call it's like Jesus' manifesto. It's the fullest expression. And likely it didn't happen. Actually, very likely it didn't actually happen. Because the scriptures they don't connect the dots here with this. But it was basically a graphic way or an expression of showing the totality of Jesus' words to the disciples. And if it did happen, even those things, they're honest about it. Did the fish actually multiply? Did he actually feed 5,000 people with 3 fish? How many fish? 5 fish. So my UTS professor has a theory. He said that likely Jesus' act of serving people food and his disciples' act of serving people's food inspired other people to give their food to other people. So if people are going to gather out of town on a mount, they're going to bring food with them. And likely they started to share that food with one another. And if it actually did happen, it was more of a sharing of food that took place, that they honored Jesus for because he was the first to break the bread and share it. So everything that Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount was radical stuff. It was radical expression. He's honoring those people who are poor in spirit, mournful, meek, hungry, and thirsty for righteousness, merciful, pure in heart, peacemakers, people who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. He's turning the tide of truth. He's turning it. And when he does so, it's all grounded in the law. It's all grounded in the scripture. But in Jesus' ministry of teaching, it's all grounded, but it's radical. It's designed to break the foundations of our understanding. And that's why I'm so comfortable with we're a unique community. We don't see things. I mean, even John the Baptist, I've sat in front of pastors and they persecute us for how we view John the Baptist. But we trust that even in Jesus' time, these words were not accepted. They were radical at the time. So in many ways, we can find comfort in that. Because even if it's radical, it doesn't make it not true. It's, people have to search their heart. So Jesus was a teacher. That was his ministry. More than anything else, he was teaching. He was guiding people, raising them up to be closer to God. And on the other side of that, the flip side of that, is that Jesus was a healer. This was secondary, though. And we know that it was secondary. But oftentimes we focus, I think in the traditional Christian community, we focus too much on this point. Yes, Jesus had a ministry of healing, but it certainly wasn't his emphasis. His emphasis was to first teach, but he had to heal. He had to heal. He invested himself into each individual. He had lines of people that were searching for this miracle healing. You can imagine, Jesus must have been exhausted healing all these people. If anyone can imagine, he's trying to be a spiritual doctor. That's exhausting. Does anyone know how many miracles he actually performed, at least that are documented? It's 37 miracles. 37. He heals the blind 5 times. Some people say he did orthopedic care for people 3 times. He was a plastic surgeon 1 time. So why does he do it? Well, partly he only does it when someone has faith. He only responded to healing when someone had faith, the majority of the time. But the reality, I believe, is actually described from True Father. So allow me to just read this a little bit. This is Jesus who walked the course of restoration didn't perform miracles and wonders happily. If you think he worked miracles and wonders because he was joyful and comfortable, that is a big misunderstanding. Since Jesus had no place to lay his body on this earth, no place that he could rely on in this universe, he was in a situation where he had no choice but to appeal to heaven. In a desperate state, when he was sad and pitiful in circumstances, he raised his hands and called out, "My Father!" And miracles occurred. Those miracles and wonders appeared through circumstances in which he called out from a place of extreme sorrow that even his bones and flesh were melting from sheer grief. These are Father's words about why Jesus performed miracles. He was in a situation where no one was listening to him. So his ministry is to teach. His ministry is to guide people to know God. That is what our true Father did. Get to know God. Knowing God is a solution. I can heal you. I can give you all the wonders and the miracles in the world. I could give you all this. You imagine in this day and age, the miracle is like, oh wow, someone gave me $1,000. I can give you all this money. I can give you all this property and things and external means and whatever. And it may be a miracle to you, but it doesn't solve the internal issue. It doesn't solve why we are suffering in the first place. And so you can imagine Jesus' agony at that time. Is I so desperately want you to heal your heart, but because you're unwilling to listen to truth, let me show you some wonder. And then maybe you will believe. And so Father describes this. This is him crying out in agony. And that's why Mother, I feel, wants us to understand the heart of Jesus, how painful it was for him to walk his ministry. And people not understanding who he was, what he came to do. But Jesus is embodied in one word, I believe, one word. And that is the word compassion. And compassion, in kind of the literal sense, it's a root is compati, and it means to suffer with you. So the embodiment of Jesus is that, even though I know I have to do this, my motivation is because I feel your suffering. I am suffering with you. So at least, God, let me give them something. Let me give them a wonder. And we all know the shortest verse in the Bible, John 11:35, is that Jesus wept. That's the heart of Jesus. And so to parallel the life of our true Father, and I know I'm doing that a lot, but I want us to grow closer to our true parents through Jesus' life. The Father says, if I pray, I could perform any number of miracles and wonders. However, no matter what circumstances arise, I will not do so. What is the use of fixing temporary circumstances? I must prepare by myself the path I will go. If I had lacked the wisdom, I would have ruined everything. If I offered prayers to cure illnesses, 1,000 or maybe even 10,000 people would have been cured. But I don't want to do that. Instead, we have to educate people. Spiritual works are for the moment, but the truth lasts for 10,000 years. And I feel that with the life of Jesus, and all those people that he saved, all those people that he healed from blindness, cured someone's hearing, ear, he gave them so much, everything he sacrificed for the sake of those people. Not a single one of them was there at the end. Where were those people? If I am saved by someone, I stand up for them. No? I'm indebted to you. But human beings, we get very selfish. And so Jesus knows. I can give you something of temporary circumstances, Father says, but I know that will not solve the deeper issue. And I think, I really believe in the power of the one-on-one, the intimacy, and the importance that, as we go about our lives and we try to teach and we try to educate, we try to give to others, and we try to emulate the life of Jesus and be good to people, I really believe that there's power in the intimate relationship and taking time. I like spending time with Stuart and Uncle Rick every week. We have a powwow. We sing together. It's awesome. I feel like I'm back in Boomville. I'm singing in a dusty chicken cabin, and it feels nice. But that to me is the critical piece. And so for the same with our children, as we try to emulate Jesus and teach them and raise them, or help our brothers, help our sisters, I think it's done in the one-on-one, in the way that Jesus tried. I think he desperately tried. So I want to conclude with some of True Mother's words about this. My conclusion is that Jesus' ministry was one of teaching and healing, with the priority on the solution, which was to teach and guide people. Totally sacrificed and gave himself for this purpose. And Mother emphasizes the same thing. She says in just a year ago, she says, now it is the time for us to teach others the truth of the providence, the truth of history, the essence of the Creator. What is the Creator's wish? It is to become the true parent of humanity. We therefore need to give presentations on the theory of true parents. She's constantly asking us to educate, educate, educate. Therefore, what should be done about this people that is ignorant of the true parents and God, our heavenly parent? We must teach them. What should be done after teaching them? They should be guided to establish true families. Isn't that right? Yes. So this is our responsibility. This is our responsibility. We are responsible to teach and guide. Now, some people are like Dr. Young, and they can go off and they can do it every single day. Other people, you need other avenues. Maybe you need to take people out on hikes. You give them an experience with nature and share a poem and that's how you can teach. But we have to always intentionally offer ourselves. Any platform we have to use it as the opportunity to share the thing that is most precious for us, to share the most important thing. As Uncle Rick always tells me, his life's mission is to bring people closer to God. Amen? Haju. This is our work. This is our responsibility. And every avenue that we can find our passion and our excitement to pour into that area, this is how we offer it. Because that provides people real 10,000-year-long actual solution. To be able to pull them out of where they're at into a relationship with God that can bring them into the beautiful future and fulfill their mission, their value, their purpose in life. And that is what God is calling us to do in this day and age. More than ever before, I feel we need to teach like Jesus taught, like our true Father taught, and like our true Mother is requesting us to do now. So thank you, Jesus, and I pray we can reflect over that. Aju.